Sridharsan survey. This is India to treat, 500,000 people, it's about $25 million. If you took that money and vaccinated, you could vaccinate 12 million dogs. There's an estimated 20 million street dogs in India. I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know how accurate any kind of survey like that is, but if you just, that comes about 60% of the street dogs. The key threshold is 66.6%, or they call it the 70% rule. If you get about 70% of the animals vaccinated, you essentially stop the spread of disease, any disease. You get 70% of people vaccinated, you stop the spread of disease. So that's always kind of the goal. About 55,000 to 56,000, depending on who you want to read, die each year from rabies and about 4 million people are treated for rabies. So rabies is a big deal, and it's a very expensive big deal, because when we're talking about treating bites, but there's long-term implications from some of these things in terms of death and disfigurement, other than just from the rabies. Okay, in the land where they have rainbows and unicorns, England. Everything's great for animals there. Everybody knows. Dundee, England, 1980s. That was not that long ago. I remember it still, okay? Maybe I'm dating myself. The first 10 years, animal control caught and killed strays with no real difference in the stray numbers. In 1989, they introduced a subsidizing spaying scheme, and by 1999, 10 years later, they had dropped the euthanasia rate by 60%. I'm sorry, they dropped the strays by 60% and the euthanasia rate by 90%. That's significant, a 90% drop in euthanasia rate. It doesn't happen overnight, but they did put money into the program, and they specifically targeted spay-neuter, subsidized spay-neuter. There's no question that this is economic-based, plain and simple, all right? Carding in 1969 reported the RSPCA was receiving over 300,000 strays a year. I've not been able to get a number on the number of strays they receive currently, the RSPCA, but I guarantee you it's going to be a lot less than this, even though the RSPCA is larger and there's a lot more people now than there was in 1969. I'd be willing to bet that. So there's only one way these things go if you do them right, and that's the right direction, the direction we want. Tinsanetl, 2012, in Bhutan, the average cost of treating a post-bite is $35.65, okay? The average cost to sterilize a dog was $6.36. That's a pretty good price, $6.36. And I don't think I could even make money at that price. Rabies was $1.66. I'm assuming this is subsidized to some degree. But if you combine the human post-exposure treatment and you did dog vaccination sterilization, the total cost over 6 years would be $73 million. Now, if you just keep doing the same thing, it totals about $77 million for the same time period. How's that possible? Simple. As you spay and neuter and vaccinate, you decrease the need. You decrease the bites, you decrease the need to have the treatment because you know that animals have been vaccinated. So you don't get treated unless you get bit by an animal of unknown source, of unknown origin, and you have a fear that it may have rabies. In an area where there's endemic rabies, you should have that fear because it is a very serious disease. But the end result is the animals ended up healthier and the people ended up healthier, and overall it was less costly. Once again, go back to the economics of it. Cleveland, and this would be in Tanzania, they did a 4-year program, 4 campaigns, approximately 1 year apart. And the initial rate of rabies vaccine was 9.1%. That's crazy low. I mean, just incredible to me, especially in an area where people actually die of rabies on a regular basis. It's just ridiculous. But after they had the vaccine program, it raised to 67.8%. So it hit that crucial 66, 67%. The incidence of canine rabies dropped by 70% after the first and 97% after the second campaign in one district. This is one district where they're looking at it. It didn't go into whether they did spay-neuter work, but I found it interesting that the incidence of dog bites decreased from 28, almost 29 per 100,000 to 6 per 100,000. Now, if they just did rabies, you'd say, well, the bites shouldn't have changed that much because I wouldn't think the temperament of the dogs would change that much because they weren't being fixed. And I still don't know in this study if they actually fixed them or not. But it could be the fact that people didn't report it. It becomes irrelevant. Like I get bit all the time, and if I get bit in India, I might get a booster on my rabies. But the truth is, I get bit in Colorado. I don't even think about rabies. It has no meaning to me, so I'm gonna wash it out and keep right on going. So it may be the fact that some of these things just didn't get reported. I don't know how rabies by itself would reduce the number of bites per 100,000, but it could be that people don't report it. They don't go because they're minor bites. Where if you're in an endemic area, you get saliva on you and you got a wound, you're going to go get a rabies. You're going to be concerned about it. So, which is a little bit different, but there's just no way of proving that. In the district adjacent to this district they were working in, There was absolutely no change in the dog rabies at all. So obviously that becomes pretty valuable information. In the other land of unicorns and rainbows, you have Animal Sheltering News, November, December 2013. That's pretty recent. Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Okay, Mississippi, you could debate whether that's really part of the United States or not. Some people wonder. But, from 2007 to 2010, the shelter intake was around 9,000 animals per year. That's a pretty significant number of animals per year. This area is not that big. They opened a low-cost subsidized spay-neuter clinic in 2011, and you just look. So it went from 9,000 to 6,477, and then 4,900. So they essentially almost cut it in half in a very short period of time. And the way you get further, you could cut that in half again. But the way you do that, because people aren't motivated necessarily to come to you, first off, the finances help, so the low-cost subsidized help. But the next step is you have to go to the really poor people. You have to go in, you have to have targeted programs, and you have to do more education, and then you might come back with some better laws, lease laws, differential licensing type laws. I don't know what they had there. So, those are the kind of things you could do to get that number even down more. But I guarantee you cut that in half. And at some point, you're going to hit a bottom that you're always going to have some animals in shelters because people are going to give them up. There's going to be other reasons, but you really should be at a very, very low rate of euthanasia over the course of a year. Chinni Krishna, who's kind of God in India when it comes to animal stuff, Blue Cross of India, amazing man. In Chennai, India, the late 1800s, they were killing about one dog per day, just picking them up, killing them, okay, had too many. By 1995, they were killing about 135 a day. That's pretty significant over the course of a year. They started ABC program. It's animal birth control. Everybody used kind of different things, but animal birth control, 1996. And essentially, they dropped in the next few years, from 96 to 2002, the rabies death in humans, this is in humans, dropped from 120 to 16. At the same time, the population was just booming. So there was a lot more humans, but a lot less rabies death. Now, if you're one of the 16 that died, this is an irrelevant stat. If you're one of the 104 that didn't die, and maybe another 20 or 30 because the population also went up, then this is a pretty important stat. There's no question that with animal birth control, spay, neuter, and vaccination, that they made a huge impact on the human population, whether the human population recognized it or not. And it's hard to prove a negative. If you're going to be destined to die, but you don't die, how do you prove that? How do you know that? So it's really important to get as many stats as you can to have them working on your side. Society for Protection of Animals, Pancheville, and Yvonne's here somewhere. This is his stuff, and I just look at the first city and the last city. They're pretty much the same. Catch, neuter, release, okay? So CNR, they have programs, yes, no, not active. What do you have? Look at the difference, more than twice the cost. I'm not going to get into the bites in Serbia because they changed the law and you get paid if you get bit by a street dog. So all of a sudden the bites go up quite a bit, and there may be scratches. You may, nick yourself on a car or something. It's a dog did that. So you get some money. So it's really hard. You can't usually use bites in that kind of circumstance. If you look at the Kula and Kovan, I'm probably not pronouncing these right at all. Those are pretty close to the same size city, but yet that's 5 times more they spent cost-wise than the other because one has a capture, neuter, release program and one doesn't. It really is that simple. And when you can compare things like that and go to the government and say, look what they're doing over in this city, and look at how much it's costing them, and look what you were doing, where's all that money going? That's ridiculous. That's 5 times more almost. So it's a humane issue, but it's also a financial issue. We want to take the humane side, but we need to stress the financial side. Those dogs there were in Serbia. Come on. That dog's got to be hypothyroid. It's got to be 10 kilos overweight, and that's a street dog, for God's sakes. So they take pretty good care of the street dogs when they take care of them right. What a life, Dollars and cents, the Ryan Newman Foundation.org. In America, we spend about $1 billion a year to pick up, house, and kill homeless animals. Now, understand, that's not the humane societies that are independent. This is the government. Now, maybe Humane Society has a contract, but this is government money spent for government work. Picking up, that's government work. The Humane Society doesn't pick up animals as a general rule for free. So if you have a contract, there's many independent animal shelters. Thousands of them. So this is just what our government spends, $1 billion. You take 5% of that money, all right, you could open 250 low-cost subsidized spay-neuter clinics, and you could spay and neuter easily 4 million animals a year. That's about what they say that we're killing right now in America. I personally think it's twice that many. But the point is, if you could spay and neuter an extra 4 million animals a year, you would definitely see an impact on our euthanasia stats over the next few years. And this would be, once these clinics are open, they're perpetual. They'll be around for a long time. So, Andrew Yoke, he was here last year in Barcelona. I think he still has the hangover, so he probably couldn't make it this year because of that. It's kind of an inside joke for those who were there. Disease control through fertility. Understand, this was just published 2014, Prevention Veterinary Medicine. This is a good magazine. This is good science here. You know, they looked at 7 conditions: body condition, fleas, fight wounds, canine parvovirus, infectious canine hepatitis, leptospirosis, Ehrlichia. And they just looked at them in these 3 cities that were essentially the same in India. They're same-size cities. One had ABC since 1994. One had ABC since 2004. Who ended up the best? The one who had the longest-standing ABC. One had no ABC program at all. The only thing that was higher, really, in the Jaipur, and I hope I'm saying that right, Jaipur city, was that they had a few more ticks. Okay, but understand, ticks cycle, and you can have tick blooms in one city and not in another city. So, you know, the bottom line for this is that even though they had more ticks, they had less tick disease. And overall, all the animals in society, in that city, were healthier. Even the ones that were never touched, the ones that were never fixed, never vaccinated, they were just healthier. Because basically, when you fix them, you really change male behavior, less roaming, those kind of things, and you absolutely stop, obviously, female reproduction. So you just end up with healthier overall animals. And I've always known that. I've always felt it. Here's the science that proves it. Long-term goals. We're running out of time here. I'll just say, you know, in the long-term goals, this is pretty straightforward for everybody. You know, define what companion animal ownership is, breeding, selling, regulations, animal control ordinances. And most countries have some of this stuff. I really do believe you have to have low to free spay-neuter programs if you really want to stop overpopulation. It's an absolute necessity. I prefer it being run by veterinarians, you know, or veterinarians in conjunction with shelters. I think it's a must. Nowhere, and I've read 200 or 300 different articles before I put this talk together, believe it or not, and nowhere did it say build more shelters or kill more animals. That was never in it. It doesn't make any sense. And not that there's nothing wrong with building a shelter, but you have to build a shelter for the right reason. If you're building a shelter to deal with overpopulation, you got it backwards. You're putting the cart in front of the horse. The World Health Organization, 1990. After initial exponential growth in a dog population, the birth rate begins to decrease and the rate of death increases, reaching equilibrium. Okay, and it all has to do with the carrying capacity of the land, you know. The carrying capacity of the environment varies with habitat and depends on the availability, distribution, and quality of resources: shelter, food, water. The density of the population of dogs, and this is the key, the density of the population of dogs is almost always near the carrying capacity of the land. I put pick your poison on here because in Mexico, where they had an outbreak of a cat with rabies, they killed cats for 3 years vigorously, and what happened at the end of 3 years, they had an outbreak of the plague. Because the carrying capacity of the land was still here. They reduced the numbers of cats. Well, guess what took its place? Rats. So you pick which animal you want to live with. You can kill all the animals you want out there. You reduce your dog population low enough, something's going to change. And it just happened to be when I was in Bucharest last week, a couple of people said, you know, we never used to see rats in downtown Bucharest, and now we're seeing them, which is, why is that? You know, it's kind of weird. Well, because there's no dogs around. It's that simple. Because you're not seeing very many dogs, so they're doing such a good job of killing the dogs in the downtown area. That doesn't mean they're going to have an impact. Someone that start killing them, the dogs are just going to come in from the outside where they have super fecundity and they still have food supplies and all that. So, that, you know, you're really, once again, spitting in the wind. You're not getting ahead of yourself. But it's very important to remember that. And I say the future, and I like to do a talk on it, is a strategy of trash disposal and pickup. We know we can vary the population, but maybe we should work on varying the carrying capacity of the land. If we get trash picked up better, if we dispose of it properly, then there's nothing for them to eat. And if there's nothing for them to eat, their numbers go down naturally. So you do a combination of trash pickup. So we need to do more lobbying for better trash pickup, for sealing up dumps better so animals can't get in there. I mean, that really would make a difference in the long run in terms of animals living and dying. And I want to read something that I got off the internet. Stray dogs do not drop down from heaven. They are a sign of idleness, indifference, and ignorance of society. When they grow into a nuisance, it is due to our ignorance and want of compassion. That is written by Mahatma Gandhi, and I think it's very appropriate. And the only thing I would say is it's also a waste of our finances to kill them. That's it. Thank you.